Hey guys, how you going? In this video I'm going to be showing you how to create this CSS only custom tooltip right here. So if I was to hover over this span tab, we can see right there a tooltip transitions from the bottom up and obviously displays above the text. So this is going to be done completely in CSS. There's going to be not one line of JavaScript needed, and it's also very easy to use. You simply add a single HTML attribute to any tag and it's going to display the tooltip just like this. So let's go inside this file right here with nothing inside of it. Inside the text editor it looks just like this. So we can begin by actually of course creating the span tag as an example. So I'm going to say span like this. I'm going to say inside here hover over me for some sample text. So to make use of the tooltip, we can add a single attribute. We can say right here data-tooltip just like this, then equals, and right here you put in your tooltip text. For example, you can say an example just like this, and now we're going to write some CSS which will of course essentially look for HTML elements with this attribute, then of course use the contents within this attribute for the tooltip text. So let's go inside the head and begin on the CSS. So it's going to be quite straightforward. It is not too complicated. So basically we're going to do this. We're going to use two square brackets right here, then say data tooltip. So essentially using square brackets like this is going to select elements that have this attribute right here. Essentially, of course, these square brackets are for selecting HTML attributes. So any tag with this attribute, we're going to say position as being relative, and we're going to say cursor as default. So this relative position basically just means that we're able to set the position of the after pseudo element to be absolute. So basically, in order to correctly position the tooltip above the text, we need this position relative right here. And of course, this cursor default is going to remove the standard text selection hover for the cursor. Okay, cool. So now for the main chunk of this video, and that is going to be right here, data-tooltip, and we're going to say : after. So basically this right here is the after pseudo element, which means it's like a dynamic element generated with CSS. So basically we can treat it like an HTML element, so we can add styles to this generated element. And of course this generated element is going to be the tooltip text itself. So firstly, we're going to work on the positioning of the tooltip. So I'm going to say position right here, and I'll say absolute. Basically it just means that we can then have greater flexibility when it comes to positioning the tooltip text. We can then say a width of 140 pixels. So for this to work, for this technique to work, you need to set a fixed width. And of course, if your text goes more than this width, the tooltip will simply grow higher. So you can of course put text longer than 140px in the tooltip, but for now we're going to say 140px. We're then going to say left, and we're going to say calc 50% minus 70px. So essentially the left attribute is going to be 50% subtracted by half of the width. So now I'm just going to simply say content, and I'll say inside here attr, so short for attribute, data-tooltip. So basically by saying this right here, you're essentially grabbing the text within the data tooltip attribute. So obviously this attr, this is obviously quite a very convenient way to of course grab the content from the attribute and put it inside the content of the pseudo element. So I'm just going to save this right here, go inside the browser, refresh, and we have this right here. So we can see that we have of course the standard text right here. So hover over me and we can see that the tooltip after pseudo element is right here. So it is positioned with a left of calc 50px minus 70 px. And if you pay close attention to it, we can see it's actually right now centered. So I just want to show you, if I was to make the left to be 0%, we can see it is basically it is in line with the actual element. Of course, making it 50% is going to push it to the right a bit, just like this, and then subtracting the 70px is going to perfectly center the actual element right there. We can see now it is centered above, of course, the actual element. Okay, cool. So that is the chunk of the positioning. We can then just go down here and we can say bottom as being 125px. It's going to push it up above the actual element right here. Then we can say text align as being center. This of course is going to center the text, and combining with the 140px it can look quite nice. Then we can say box sizing as border box, because we're going to be adding some padding later on, and that is going to help, of course, make the padding look nice. So I can then save this and refresh again, and we have this result right here. So we are definitely getting places. Of course, it is 125% above, and that's of course what the bottom 125% did. Cool, so now we can work on the aesthetics of the actual tooltip. So back inside here, I'm going to go down here now and give it a text color of white, a background of black. You can of course even do something like RGBA 000 0.75, and that'll make a 75% opaque black, but I'm just going to say black because I think it looks a bit better and it's a bit more readable. A padding of 8px works fine, bit of padding right there. A border radius of 10px, just some more aesthetic stuff. I find a font size of 90% of the current font size works quite well, and a font weight of bold also seems to work quite well for these tooltips. So I can now save this and refresh once again, and now we get this result right here. So looking not bad so far. So what's left is just going to be, of course, the actual hover effect and the animation or the transition. So back inside the CSS, again we can go down here and we can basically set the initial properties for the tooltip text. So we're going to firstly set the visibility to be hidden. We don't want the tooltip to be displaying by default. Then we're going to say opacity of 0. So the reason why we have opacity 0 and visibility of hidden is because the opacity of 0 is going to allow us to animate in or transition in the opacity to create the fade effect. And the visibility of hidden ensures that the user can't actually select or see the tooltip while it is not showing. So combining these two allows us to achieve best of both worlds in that regard. Then we can say transform of translate y, and then 10px right there. So basically it's going to start behind the scenes being 10 pixels down from its current position. So I might just get rid of these two properties and then save this for a bit of demonstration. So I'll refresh. We can see it actually moved down. If I was to remove the translate like this, we can see it actually goes back up. So essentially we're going to begin with 10px like that. Then then with the animation we can just move it upwards. And that's how, of course, it's going to fade up just like that. So back inside here, let's make these two back where they were. And finally, we can set the transition here to be opacity at 0.3 seconds. And then we can say transform. I like to put 0.2 seconds, a bit less than what the opacity takes to come in. And then finally, we can go down here and we can say data-tooltip. Obviously remember that this is the element, the main element right here. So we're going to say when this gets hovered over, we're going to target the after pseudo element. So we can then say, of course, opacity of 1. We can set the visibility to be visible, and that is the default value right there. And we can set transform to be translate y at 0. So basically, we're going to be resetting the opacity and the transform as well as the visibility back to the original values. And this time, of course, is going to work in a nice transition to create the nice fade in animation. And that is all for the tooltip. So I'm going to save this and refresh one last time. We can see now it works just fine. Hover over this and the tooltip displays perfectly right there. And that is how you can create a CSS only custom tooltip. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you later.